Council meeting of February 23rd, 2015 with Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Jerry DiTullio.
Here.
Bud Starker.
Present.
Zachary Urban.
Present.
Christy Davis.
Here.
Tim Fitzgerald.
Here.
George Pond.
Present.
Tracy Langworthy.
Here.
Genevieve Wooden.
Here.
Madam Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, before we begin,
Yeah.
I'd like to just take a moment and offer a moment of silence for Tony Flasco, a former member of this body who served from 78 to 79 and then again from 83 to 93. And if we could just take a moment and remember him and thank him for all of his service. And then I have some information regarding his services which are occurring later this week.
Let's do that, please. Thank you. What are the times of his services?
His services will be held at a visitation next Sunday, 4 to 7 p.m. across the street at Crown Hill from 4 to 7. And then funeral services will be Monday at 11 a.m. at 1350 Washington Street. That's St. John's Cathedral. And if you have any questions, you can contact his daughter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. This will be approval of the minutes of February 9th. Text of the minutes will follow by email. So we don't have those.
Yeah, they were sent out to you, and I would, I want to inform council that there was an error about who introduced the sex offender registration fee ordinance thing on first reading, and it was, I had put it as Councilmember Fitzgerald, and it was Councilmember DiTullio, and that's already been corrected.
That's been corrected. Any other corrections to the minutes? Then the minutes stand approved as delivered. Proclamations and ceremonies. We don't have a principal here today? Genevieve? Okay. Well, then I can move on to a pretty darned important proclamation. Kent Davis, would you mind stepping forward? I want to introduce to you Kent Davis. Kent is one outstanding citizen in the city of Wheat Ridge. This guy has been celebrating or has helped the city, involved with the city of Wheat Ridge for 45 years. He was a city council member for 14 years. He was on the Civil Service Commission for 10 years. And the Civil Service Commission, as I understand, was sort of a police advisory group, both in selection process as well as handling grievances. So it was a pretty important commission. We don't have it now. Dan, you get all of that now. Anyway, our guy here was on that commission for 10 years. He was on the Housing Authority for 8 years and on the Liquor Authority for 20 years. He was on the Wheat Ridge Business District for 10 years. Wheat Ridge Carnation Festival as well. He's been a Wheat Ridge business owner, property owner, as well as a homeowner right here in our city. And I asked his daughter today, who is, of course, Christy Davis, and she said he was born and raised here. Is that correct, Christy? Well, this is a pretty significant recognition. So we have for Kent what's called a key to the city. And what that means, the key to the city, is it's an old medieval type of a custom. At one point, the gates of a city were locked. And if you got a key to the city, that meant you could come and go freely. So I don't know where you get to go with this, but I assume all of our offices or anything?
I hope I can go home.
I just want to wholeheartedly thank you for your years of service. Present this with you, and I'd like your daughters to come up. Christy, do you want to come up too? And I assume you have a camera. and we can get a picture of you receiving this award, this designation.
Well, I might add that
Please.
Civil Service Commission, there was no city hall.
Talking to the microphone.
When the Civil Service Commission first started, there was no city hall. So at Davis Brothers Floors, that's where we held the interviews and the promotions and stuff like that. Police department was on, I think, about 44th and Oak or somewhere around. Pardon? No, not the police. They were down on 44th. And then City Hall was in a bank over here. So I think we've come a long way.
Step over here, Christy, come on in. That's all right. Well, that was more fun than probably the rest of the meeting will be, but moving on now, this would be citizens' right to speak. Citizens who wish may speak on any matter not on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes and sign the public comment roster. This is for items not on the agenda. And while I have your attention, please turn off your cell phones if you have them on. Thank you very much. Cullen, you're first. Followed by Monica, John McMillan, and Larry Matthews.
Hello, my name is Colin Anenson. I'm a constituent services representative for Congressman Ed Perlmutter, and I just had a brief announcement about some upcoming events we're hosting. The first is a telephone town hall. It is a live conference call you can participate in from your own home, and Ed is inviting you and your neighbors to participate in a live town hall to discuss important issues such as the economy, job growth, wage growth, and other important issues to Coloradans. And that will be March 11th from 7 to 8 p.m. And immediately following the telephone town hall, we'll be doing our first ever Twitter town hall, if you prefer that, and that's from 8 to 8:30 p.m. For details and registration, you can just visit our website, which is perlmutter.house.gov. You can register and get the call by using our events page. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Monica?
Good evening. Monica Duran, 2980 Upham Street. I wanted to start this evening by thanking the council for your $2,500 scholarship donation to the Jefferson Center for Mental Health. As a board member and on behalf of our board, we thank you so much. You know that we work on donations and of all kinds, so we really appreciate it. It's going to go a long way. We're also having a gala on April 4th. I don't know if you're aware of that. We have two big fundraisers a year. We have one in April, and then we have Put Your Stuff that's in July. So I have an invitation. I just have one. I'll kind of give to Janelle, just to kind of pass around in case anyone is interested in attending. If I can hand that to you. Also, I wanted to extend an invitation to city staff and council to a community meeting that is going to be hosted by Councilman Jerry DiTullio in District 1 and Councilman Zach Urban in District 2. It's going to be on Wednesday, March 4th from 6 to 7:30. It will be at the UFCW local at 7760 West 38th Avenue. It's on the first floor. The topic of discussion is going to be the 38th and Wadsworth development. It's also, we're going to be going over the TIF and the PIF and kind of addressing any issues and questions related to that. So I extend an invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Hello, my name is John McMillan at 9801 West 38th Avenue. I know some of you, and I've talked with you, some of you, about what I'm going to say. This concerns a special use permit application that's been filed for 3890 Kipling Street. And I, as one of the very few people who received letters about this, I sent in a letter of opposition to force a special use hearing. And some of you haven't been through a special use hearing in a while, but I went through my first one 20 years ago as a reporter for the Sentinel newspapers in this room. Then again, as planning commissioner, I was trained by the same city attorney that special use permits are different. They are not uses by right. They're not permitted uses. From your city's own website, it says special uses are intended to fill a particular void. Approval of a special use is dependent on compatibility with surrounding uses, design of the property, and operation and management of the use. I believe this is a bad business for this site because it's the most prominent business, the old Curves business location next to the large Marge Shopping Center, because it's right next to the driveway into Everett School where all the students have to pass going in and going out. I've talked with the principal about this at the school. He's very concerned about it. He shared all my concerns. He has to go into that parking lot to shoo the kids out of the shopping center every day after school. He doesn't want to see this go in, but his mouth is shut. His hands are tied. He can't testify because it's a government-to-government thing. So I'm here to testify instead. And I'm not testifying because this hearing isn't happening yet, but I'm here to tell you to exercise great discretion about this. Tattoos are a controversial subject. I've read that 20% of the adult population of the U.S. has one now. That's great. They have the right to do it. But that also means that 80% of the adult population doesn't have a tattoo. And it's probably not because they couldn't find a tattoo shop to get one in. Wheat Ridge already has 7. As far as I know, none of them are right in front of a school driveway. Now, there are 7 shops in Wheat Ridge as far as I was able to look up on the web, and I believe the 8th one should not be in this location because of its proximity to the school. Everett School is about to get a gifted and talented program next year, which could give them a chance to step up their game and get a higher echelon of student in there. But parents have to choose to come to that school. And as a parent of a GT student myself, who I drove down to Creighton every day because there was no program in Wheat Ridge, I would not have chosen to drive my kid past a tattoo shop 200 times a year, 2 years in a row, and go through those conversations. These are some of the things I'll say again in more depth when the hearing comes, but I want you to look at this and tell you that carefully and tell you that you have the power to say no to this. It's not discrimination against the shop or the industry if you follow the public procedures that you would follow for a sex shop, a pot shop, or a liquor store. They're all adults-only businesses, and I don't believe they belong right next to a school driveway. It doesn't reflect well on the school or on our city. So we'll see you when the main event comes. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And Larry Mathis.
Good evening, Larry Matthews, 3851 Hoyt Street. I have to hurry here because this is just a little lengthy. It's a kind of a lead-in for several topics that I'm anticipating presenting over the next several months. It's an article written by Bruce Barker, who is a councilman at the city of Westminster, and it regards TIF. The article name is Westminster Abusing Blight Designation for TIF-Funded Urban Renewal. Few Coloradans have any idea how much money is diverted away from counties, school districts, and special districts and into the pockets of cities by urban renewal area projects. Ask Colorado Counties, Inc., which represents Colorado County Commissioners, and they will give you an earful. In Larimer County, ask about the Centerra project, and some folks will become livid. I think if people knew the details in URAs, many would say URAs have become an example of dishonest government. URAs had their birth in federal law in the late 1940s. Their purpose was the elimination of substandard and other inadequate housing through the clearance of slum and blighted areas. At first, it was a way to reap federal funds for local projects. By the 1970s, with federal projects running out, the Colorado legislature gave cities the tool of tax increment financing. New, up-to-date, desirable neighborhoods generate much more property tax than do old, obsolete, unappealing neighborhoods. The difference between old and new property tax is the increment that would service bonds to pay for assemble properties, fix deficits, and upgrade the infrastructure required for new neighborhoods. Commercial properties are depreciated so businesses have a financial tool to reinvent themselves. Owner-occupied houses are not depreciated, so TIF services as a tool are so TIF service serves as a tool for reinvention. Unfortunately, by the 1980s, the last item on the URA list was housing. URAs had evolved into a tool for economic development. To satisfy the requirements, eliminate slum and blight, the "and" has been effectively changed to "or," and blight, being a subjective evaluation, can be anything a city says. Anything a city wants is blighted. This is a misuse of government prerogatives, sort of like the Denver suburb that was ticketing drivers with an item hooked on their rearview mirrors for an unobstructed view. Economic benefit usually comes as a side effect of eliminating slum and blight, but cannot be the primary factor. Today, it's estimated that 90% of URAs are economic development projects. These are projects that do not eliminate substandard housing, but pretend in order to assume that label. I was elected in 2013 to City Council voicing my opposition to what Westminster is doing with URAs. Previous councils had cleverly used URAs and TIFs to make the economic successes at the Walnut Creek URA and the North Huron URA, but no slum was eliminated. We are generating loads of money for our economic benefit, but our diversion of property tax leaves the counties and schools on the short end. We are ignoring the spirit and intent of the law. I don't think this is honest government, but it gets worse. And if I'm out of time, I guess I'll have to quit.
I'm afraid you're out of time, but
Okay, I am going to leave this with Janelle.
thank you.
And if anyone is interested in reading the rest of the article, please feel free. At future times, I'll be talking about Westminster City Mall and also Littleton's riverfront. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comment that is not signed up? Okay, we can move on to the approval agenda. Are there any changes in tonight's agenda? If not, then it's approved as written. Moving on to item number 1, Mr. DiTullio.
Yes, item number 1 is Council Bill number 05-2015, an ordinance adopting a new section 16-160 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws requiring the payment of sex offender fees at the time of registration. Issue, Colorado Revised Statutes 16-22-108 7A provides for a local law enforcement agency to establish a registration fee to be paid by persons registering as a sex offender and re-registering annually or quarterly. The amount of the fee shall reflect the actual direct costs incurred by the local agency, but shall not exceed $75 for the initial registration and $25 for any subsequent annual or quarterly registration. And I just wanted to mention, I talked to the police chief, there's not a schedule in here of fees, but we will be, if this passes, it will be a $75 initial registration fee and then a $25 annual fee, according to our police chief.
Any comments or from staff or additional comments about this?
Thank you, Mayor Jay and City Council. Just to recap on this, this particular ordinance allows us the ability as a city to collect the registration fee, whether it's a $75 or $25. CRS 1622-108 subsection 7 sets in place and establishes, the fees that law enforcement agencies can charge for sex offenders, those people who are deemed as a result of a conviction to have to register for being found guilty of certain sex offenses. Those fees and the way the schedule is set up is a law enforcement agency can charge a reasonable fee, based on the time and effort that is put in by the agency to register, but they can't charge any more than $75 for the initial annual registration and then $25 for subsequent re-registrations. So this ordinance doesn't change any of that, but the issue and the challenge that we've had over the years is about 20% of the sex offenders that come to our department to register don't pay. And we're required as an agency, if they show up and they reside in Wheat Ridge, to register them, but we don't have a process or a means of collecting that money. So this ordinance would allow us, if a sex offender shows up to register and doesn't have the money to pay, we would issue them a municipal citation into court, and with the idea that, if they pay that fee, on the day of court or prior to that, that charge would be dismissed. But if they don't pay that, then the court would have the ability to find them guilty and put in place some conditions that ensure that they pay for that particular fee. It's based on a model that the city of Brighton has been using. They have tended to be at the forefront of this, and they have taken their registration rates in terms of payment from about 80% where we were to 100%. So they get 100% compliance. So the idea here is not so much that we're collecting that 20%. That's nice. The bigger part is if sex offenders come here to Wheat Ridge to register, they'll be very much fully aware that our city requires them to pay for their the registration for the fee for that particular registration. Thank you.
Any questions?
Madam Mayor.
I see him. Mr. Ross.
And I think you've referred to this, and I see it in the report, but I just want a clarification. So is it correct that regardless of the level of the fee or whether the fee is paid, the registration itself actually will take place regardless?
Yes, the registration will always take place regardless. We're obligated statutorily to register them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pond. Any other questions of staff? Mr. Urban.
Thank you. Chief, in the regulation that you cited, it indicated that there could be either an annual or a quarterly registration. I understand we have an annual registration. Is there any costs or benefits related to offering a quarterly versus an annual registration?
There's several types of registrations that occur by state law depending on the conviction for the sex offender. So some minor sex offenses require just a annual registration. Our more serious sex offenders are required to register on a quarterly basis. And if they do their initial registration, that's the $75 fee, then any re-registrations after that point are done on a quarterly basis. I'm sorry, on a annual basis, the $25. Those that have to register on a quarterly basis, if I'm not mistaken, Commander Pickett will correct me, register one time and then they just have to show up to be re-registered. They don't have to pay a continuous fee over the course of a year.
But given the severity of a particular situation, this isn't the only interaction they would have with either a parole officer or other law enforcement, correct?
Well, it depends on whether or not they've sort of killed their time, that they've done their time and they're off of probation. So we work with sex offenders who are on probation, who are on parole, and some who have done their time and are under no obligations to report to a parole officer. We have a pretty robust sex offender registration system in that we, both our patrol officers and our detectives, do checks over the course of the year to ensure that the address where a sex offender is registered to is in fact where they are staying. And when we run across sex offenders who are living in our city that haven't registered, we arrest them as well and charge them for failure to register.
Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Fitzgerald.
This is a question for Mr. Dahl. This would, if a person was found guilty of not registering or not paying the fine, that would constitute a violation of parole, isn't that right, and send them back to prison?
Well, it'd be a violation of law. It really would depend upon the conditions of their parole, which vary, as you know. But if one of the if one of the conditions of that person's parole extended to fully complying with the sex offender registration law, then yes. But it would vary depending upon what the conditions of parole were.
But have you ever seen? I have never seen Right, so in the real world, it would be a violation of parole, and that person would automatically go back to prison and cost 10,000 times more than the registration fee.
I'll tell you, I'm not an expert in that field in terms of what parole violations are, automatically trigger, a return to prison. I think you'd at a minimum have to be in front of a judge to determine that. And again, without exceeding what I know, I can tell you that I imagine the judge would consider failing to pay not a fairly minor violation, failing to register, a little more significant.
Well, that's my second question, actually. I believe the legislature in the last session passed a law that would prohibit sending a violator to prison for lack of paying a fine. So I don't think we could send a person to prison in this case if they were not on parole, for example. But it seems to me like this is just, since we can't send a person to prison if they're not on parole, which I don't think is going to be very often. I think almost all of them would be on parole. So this is a way of getting around that and just sending them back to prison. Isn't that right?
Jerry, I can try to address that.
Chief's got an answer.
So we work real closely with parole officers in terms of those offenders who are still on parole. So as part of their conditions to be on parole, they're required to ensure that they register. They would be required to make sure that they pay, and if they don't, then it potentially could be a violation of their parole. But there are a lot of things that would be set in place before revoking somebody's parole and just sending them back to prison for this. That's not the intent of this. It never has been the intent, to do what you're suggesting would occur in here. I'm not saying that it might not happen, but generally speaking, what a parole officer would do is ensure that the client that they have on parole is registering, is paying their bills, and doing those things that are appropriate under the conditions that particular client might be under. It might be a case. We just had one with a sexually violent predator that was registering in another community, but we were getting ready to do a notification in ours, and that person violated the terms of their parole before they ever got a chance to do this community notification. So those kinds of things do occur, and that parole officer has a process that they follow in regards to that. But that's not the purpose at all of this. The purpose of it is to ensure that the city is collecting the fees that they charge, and those individuals who by law are required to register are paying those fees.
But the person, in your example, the person who violated their parole, that was not for lack of paying the fee. That
No,
was
not
for
in this
some other
particular
purpose.
case, no.
Right.
And
So,
it
and you
may or
said
may
that,
not be in
that you would
this other
put
case.
things in place, and aren't those exactly the same things you would put in place now?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the
You
question.
said that in the event that there was a failure to pay under this new regime here, that there would be things set in place before they went back to prison. And my question is, aren't those exactly the same things that are put in place now?
In terms of the conditions?
Attempts to make the person pay.
No.
Are we ready for the question? You have a question? Yes, I do. Mr. Starper.
Thank you. This is either for Mr. Dahl or for Chief Brennan. When we enact Section 16-160, which is the sort of the action part of this ordinance, is there guidance given if a sex offender were required to register and failed to register and pay the fee, that would then be that would then constitute a breach of our law? And does this ordinance provide guidance to the judge to adjudicate this situation? Or is that contained elsewhere in the code?
Well, it's a violation of our code, as would be the violation of any other section in the code. There's a section at the very beginning of the code, I think it's 1-4 or 5, that says violation of anything in this book, this will go in the book, is punishable by a summons and complaint in a municipal court, and then the judge has the fine and jail time authority that section gives. $1,000 in a year, I think, is the limits of the judge's enforcement authority. So, like anything else in the book, if you fail to register, then that's a violation, and you can be cited for it. Am I missing anything? No.
Okay, so I just have a question on here. It has a note in our information part that says that the notice of fee pay form also specifies that a registrant shall not be considered registered until his fee has been paid. So if they don't pay the fee, are they not then registered under current conditions?
My name is Dave Pickett. I'm the interim division chief for Sports Services Division. And the statute says that a person will not be fully registered. However, there is no state provision for if they fail to produce the fee. So it goes to the city of Wheat Ridge to do its best for the community in this case, which is have the registration go through, have the registration reported to the state system and also to the municipal system so that citizens have access to it.
And that's kind of where I think that we've talked about a lot about the fee, but that's a very important part of it. We need our citizens to know when they have someone that could impact their life nearby. And if this kind of creates the closure in the loop that makes that happen, I support that, because as a parent of a small child with friends with small children, you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood. So thank you.
I believe, was that what Mr. Pond had asked as well? And Councilman DiTullio.
So I think it was last summer, there was an incident in District 1 where there was a sex offender had attempted an assault on a female, and Mr. Starker and I had a neighborhood meeting over off the old firehouse, and a lot of people were concerned about how many sex offenders live in the city. You know, we're 9 square miles basically, and so we did some research. I came down to City Hall and I pulled the list, because the public list don't contain everybody if they're a minor or if they're certain offenses aren't on this public list. But if you come down and talk to the police to get the full list, all the names are on there. And at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, when we pulled the list, there was about 140 names within the city of Wheat Ridge that were registered sex offenders. And so I think, like Ms. Langworthy had mentioned, to have this registration fee, it's one more thing to show that they're going to be responsible citizens in the neighborhood. They'll register, they'll pay their fee. That's their doing business. They're in the city of Wheat Ridge and they have to live here now. They want to live here. So that's one more thing they're going to have to do because of what they've done in the past. I mean, everybody has to pay for the past. They pay fees all the time on things. So I think it's just one more check and balance to have in our neighborhoods, like Ms. Langworthy mentioned, to allow neighbors and folks in the area to know who's there if they want to pull that list from the city, and it gives that closure. It also shows that they can be responsible by paying. So I'll be supporting it tonight.
So, Madam Mayor, if I could just touch on Councilmember DiTullio's comments. There are 2 ways that citizens can check to see if sex offenders live in their neighborhood or in the city. One is you can go to one of 2 websites. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation's website has an active list of sex offenders on it, and the Sex Offender Tracking and Registration, it's called SOTAR, S-O-T-A-R, is a website that we use in collaboration with other law enforcement agencies to track and register sex offenders. But by law, there are only certain registered sex offenders that you can put on a website. So generally, you can't put juvenile offenders on there, and certain other low-level offenders, we don't, by law, put on the internet or a website. And that's the list that Councilmember DiTullio is referring to. The police department also maintains a list of all registered sex offenders, and that list is available to any citizen who wants to come in and fill out a criminal justice records request and request that particular list. And it changes on a daily basis. Thank you.
How long does a person remain on that list?
It depends on their classification as a sex offender. Some people have to register, annually or quarterly for the rest of their lives. And there's a process. There's a process to go back to court for some sex offenders to have that requirement removed.
Any further questions, or are we ready for the motion?
Madam Mayor, there's no one signed up, but it's a public hearing, so you should open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone who wants to testify.
Actually, it didn't show it's a public hearing. I didn't see it.
Second reading? Okay.
Doesn't have public hearing.
Ordinance on second reading, always public hearing. There's no one signed up, but you should ask.
Yeah, but I appreciate your.
Yeah.
I did notice that no one had signed up.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready then for the motion? You want me
No, I'd ask you to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this matter?
Great.
Seeing
Close
none,
it up.
let's close the public hearing and move on to the motion.
Madam Mayor?
Sign an ordinance number first.
Yeah. This is going to be ordinance number 1566.
Are we ready?
Yep.
I move to approve Council Bill number 05-2015, an ordinance approving a new section 16-160 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws requiring payment of sex offender fees at the time of registration on second reading, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
Ms. Langworthy, you seconded? Yes, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, or can we go ahead and vote? Please vote.
Motion carries 7-1 with Councilmember Fitzgerald voting no.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, Councilmember Langworthy. Oh, did I jump one? I did. I can see how I did that. Councilmember Fitzgerald on item number 2.
Okay.
Let's see, we got
Do you have an ordinance number for this? Okay, Council Bill 06-215, an ordinance amending section 16-156 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning interference with public officers performing their duties. And this is an ordinance on second reading. The issue is the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws defines and prohibits several acts that constitute interference with public officers performing their duties. One subsection prohibits verbally abusing or threatening officers. Another section prohibits refusing to provide one's identifying information to an officer when requested. This ordinance modifies these sections to be consistent with current state of constitutional law.
Now I'm going to ask for an ordinance, and I'll open the public hearing.
This will be ordinance number 1567.
Thank you. I'm opening the public hearing on that.
If I could make just a quick staff report, I think the issue covered it. I apologize, public hearing wasn't checked on this one either, and I have to own that. So I'm going to own that. I didn't check that box. You'll notice there are 3 sections being amended here. One, it changes for gender and makes it gender neutral on the firefighter. That's the subsection A. Taking out subsection B, which is really the exercise of First Amendment rights. I don't like, what you're saying or doing, officer. People are allowed to say these things, and that's being deleted. The last sentence, or the last section, C or D, however you want to look at it, that's being amended, really narrows the ability of the officer to require ID to circumstances in which there is probable cause, reasonable suspicion, which is classic language. It's right out of the case law. So the proper way to characterize this ordinance is really a narrowing of officer authority to to respect constitutional rights of citizens and to follow constitutional law cases handed down by the courts. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any, I don't think we have any public comment on that. Do we have any public comment on this? No, we don't. Do we have a staff report? And if so, do I need to sign you in?
That was it.
That was it. That was our report. Okay. Then we can go ahead and close the public hearing. Motion's in order.
I move to approve Council Bill 06-2015, ordinance number 1567, and ordinance amending section 16-156 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning interference with public officers performing their duties on second reading, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember DiTullio. Any discussion? Please cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Now I can move on to item number 3. Resolution read by Councilmember Langworthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 13-2015, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for the use and maintenance of a regional crime justice records management system. At issue, modern law enforcement agencies have a record management system, RMS, which is usually paired or interfaced with a computer-aided dispatch, CAD, system and field reporting system. The Wheat Ridge Police Department purchased its current RMS, CAD, and field supporting systems from Logistics? Thank you. Systems in 1999. Since 2008, Jefferson County law enforcement agencies have been exploring opportunities to regionalize to create efficiencies, save taxpayer dollars, and make Jefferson County agencies more effective in providing law enforcement services. A regionalized RMS was identified as an area of significant need due to the age of existing systems countywide. Some agencies need to replace aging systems immediately, and several agencies were deciding whether to upgrade or replace existing systems. The Jefferson County Regionalized Public Safety and Technology Consortium was formed to identify the most technologically reliable, effective, and efficient RMS for the law enforcement agencies of the Jefferson County region. This consortium identified niche technology as a vendor of choice to create a regional criminal justice RMS.
Any staff report on this one?
I think we've talked about this on several occasions with City Council. From a police department perspective, we think that this is a real benefit to the community of Wheat Ridge. It certainly is a cost-saving effort in purchasing a system that we would never be able to afford on our own. We think that from a budget perspective, besides being a significant cost savings, it also allows us to leverage our IT resources with other jurisdictions, and also to leverage our ability to share data and information as it pertains to criminal justice records. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Any questions of staff?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Herbert.
Thank you. Am I correct in assuming that the cost that we are sharing in this is proportionate to our officer force or our sworn membership in the consortium?
So the costs, the way the costs were done is based on the sworn personnel that each agency has. That's how you buy your licenses, so that's how the cost figuring was done.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Please read the motion.
That wasn't even on, sorry. Sorry, Jenna, I didn't have my microphone on. I move to approve resolution number 13-2015, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for the use and maintenance of a regional criminal justice records management system.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Pond and Ms. Wooden. Any discussion? Please cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0.
And item number 4, Councilmember Starker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to introduce item number 4 tonight. This is resolution number 14-2015, a resolution in support of Senate Bill 15-177 to fix barriers to attainable and affordable housing. At issue in this matter, the Colorado's economy is dependent on a strong housing market that includes diverse and attainable options. Despite strong demand, communities across Colorado, including Wheat Ridge, face a growing shortage of owner-occupied multifamily housing. First-time home buyers have significantly fewer viable options, forcing them into the rental market. Senate Bill 15-177 will facilitate construction of more affordable housing while protecting the rights of homeowners.
Thank you. Any staff report on this one? Nope. Mr. Urban, you were going to ask a question of staff?
No, not necessarily a question, just a statement, but
Okay.
are we to the discussion point?
We need a motion first.
Go ahead.
A motion is in order?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I move to approve resolution number 14-2015, a resolution in council in support of Senate Bill 15-177 to fix barriers to attainable and affordable housing.
May I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Urban, and now discussion.
Madam Mayor, I would hope that this resolution serves as a clear message to the General Assembly that if they choose not to or are unable to get it done, as it were, that this won't be the last time that we address this issue in this body. It's not my preferred method, but I think that if the General Assembly can't get it done, that we will, because 2005 was the last time any condos were built in the city of Wheat Ridge, and that puts a pressure on the overall housing market, and we need to be able to consider all of our housing options when we're looking at new developments, and presently, under the current conditions, we're not able to do so, and so I'll be voting in favor of this resolution for that reason and many others, but just want to make it clear that our hope is that the General Assembly will take this issue to heart and take swift action on it and move it through and get a signature of the governor on it, because it is a very critical issue to the housing market and the overall economy.
Thank you. Mr. DiTullio.
Mr. Dahl, if this Senate bill does fail, how fast can we react to look at using the Lakewood ordinance to move forward with the same changes?
I've got a version of Lakewood ordinance. I've gone through it. It wouldn't be very hard to recast it as a Wheat Ridge ordinance. So you have the ability to do 2 readings, or an emergency ordinance, 1 reading. So it could be, it's not that lengthy, not that difficult. I could have it to you within a week of your saying you want to see it.
And then would it have to go to Planning Commission too?
Yes, because it'd probably be a Chapter 26 change unless we can characterize it as a Chapter 11. I'd have to think about that. Building code, or a licensing kind of ordinance. But as Council's aware, it's not unusual for us to do first reading here while Planning Commission does their hearing and get the Planning Commission recommendation out of the way in between first and second reading. You also have the ability, even on a 2-reading ordinance, to make it effective upon approval on second reading, which shortens the time frame. So really, we've been able to do ordinances even without emergency treatment in a month, even when they required council or Planning Commission review.
Well, without an amendment to this tonight, or a motion amending this, would you be willing to be ready to go if this fails at the state legislature, so we could bring something forward to city council for review?
Sure, I have the Lakewood ordinance. I've reviewed it. It's easily enough loaded up on the machine, and I can do that with very little delay.
Be proactive.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Wooden.
I am in support of this. I do think something needs to change, obviously, either at the state level or if we make a change at the city level also. It was a little disheartening to hear this week at the Urban Land Institute presentation that a builder and a developer did say at that presentation that even though this may go through at the state level and it has gone through at the Lakewood level, that builders are somewhat reluctant to be the first one to test it. So I think it'd be great if we had it in place on a state level to encourage builders to go forward so that we can get some of these projects going.
Mr. Starker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to vote in favor of this ordinance too. This is a reasonably, a moderate solution, an effort to reach a solution that will spur more home ownership in the condominium community and the condominium market. To speak sort of to the other passage of a Wheat Ridge equivalent of the Lakewood ordinance, I would hope that we could send a message to our representatives in the strong hope that they could pass this, because when we start on a city by city basis trying to make reasonably complicated ordinances that may not be consistent across different jurisdictions, becomes very complicated for builders and developers to try to understand the implications of that, and it may not forward the process of getting us more affordable housing. So I appreciate the offer, but I think that we should strongly pass this ordinance and really work with our representatives to see if we can bring about this through the state legislature rather than on a municipality by municipality basis.
I'm going to hand the gavel to the Mayor Pro Tem so that I may speak to this as well. I was at the DRCOG meeting where the DRCOG board overwhelmingly, I shouldn't say overwhelmingly, no, they did agree to support this legislature, as well as the very same things came up. There is some danger of having ordinances that vary all over and having every city saying, oh, what's your version or what's another version. So I do respect the comments here. CML has given the backup, as well as many, many other agencies. So that was just something I wanted to add to it.
May I give you back the gavel?
Give me my club. Oh, Mr. DiTullio.
Well, I wanted to echo what Mr. Starker mentioned, and I'm not suggesting we write one now, but my concern is that I've seen in the past where CML takes a stand in favor of something and you have half the House, or the Senate is sponsoring this, but I could see this dying in the House or governor veto. So all I'm asking for, like I've always mentioned in the past, is a plan B, that if the legislature fails again, to bring something meaningful, that we are ready to react, because we're actually in a building mode too. So.
All right, we've had a motion and a second. Are we ready? I'm sorry, Mr. Urban.
Just to reiterate, I'd hope that the state legislature wouldn't want that patchwork of ordinances across the state, and that should be a forceful enough threat to incentive, threat, whatever, to get the deal done and get it over with. So that's all I have.
I believe we're ready for the vote. Please cast your vote.
Motion carries 8-0.
And item number 5, Councilmember Davis. Are you ready for this?
At issue is a motion to approve appointments to boards and commissions. The boards and commission vacancies were advertised in the Wheat Ridge Transcript on Channel 8 and on the Wheat Ridge website. Current members were contacted by mail and asked if they wanted to serve another term. Applications were reviewed and compiled by the clerk's office with notification to council on the status. And so is a motion in order?
Yes, please. I move to appoint.
I would like to recommend this motion, and I'm speaking on behalf of all the council folks in each district. So I'm gonna just list each district. Madam, yes. So I would like to move to appoint the following individuals, and I'll name them by district. And I will also give you the list, Janelle, for your records.
Okay.
Alrighty. I have them written. Okay. So District 1, I move to appoint Dan Bradford to the Board of Adjustments term. And for all of District 1, I'm going to just make it easy on myself. These are all terms ending March 2nd, 2018.
Okay.
So Dan Bradford to the Board of Adjustments. David Fairtag to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Ron Giehoff to the Cultural Commission. Dirk Bowden to the Planning Commission. And Carolyn Peterson to the Liquor Board Authority.
Now, we probably want a second on those and then move forward.
Okay.
The way this is written.
I'll second.
Yeah, please,
I'll second those.
That's fine.
Okay.
Who was the second?
Bud.
Mr. Starker.
Should we vote?
Yeah.
I'm going to vote on that.
Oh, we can do that.
Okay. Motion carries 8-0.
Okay, so the next motion, hey, I wasn't even on recorder. My voice carries. For District 2, and again, these are all for terms ending March 2nd, 2018. I move to appoint Jill Shannon to the Cultural Commission, Charles Spielman to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and Lisa Nazarinas to the Liquor Authority Board, or Elizabeth Nazarinas.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries 8-0.
Okay, now for District 3, again, all these terms will be ending March 2nd, 2018. I move to appoint Michael Illo to the Cultural Commission, Janet Bell to the Board of Adjustment, Ronald Abo to the Building Code Advisory Board, hopefully I didn't kill everybody's name, Amanda Weaver to the Planning Commission, Paul Shaver to the Liquor Authority Board, and Guy Namiash to the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Second.
Please vote, council.
And those are all ending. Those are all ending.
2018.
Motion carries 8-0.
Okay. District 4. I move to appoint, and these are different dates, so I will say these out loud. I move to appoint Sandra Hagovic to the Cultural Commission, term ending March 2nd, 2017. Sandra Nance to the Cultural Commission, term ending March 2nd, 2018. Claudia Worth to the Liquor Authority Board, term ending March 2nd, 2016. Bruce McIntyre to the Liquor Authority Board, term ending March 2nd, 2018. And I would like to thank the folks in District 4 for appointing that person. They're actually a District 2. We had 2 candidates so we could fill. So thank you for that. And I would also like to appoint Pam Olson to the Planning Commission, term ending March 2nd, 2018. And just so folks know, there's still a couple of vacancies that if you're interested, there's a Building Code Advisory Board and a Board of Adjustments for District 4. So please contact the city clerk if you're interested.
Second.
Motion carries 8-0.
Okay, so the last ones I'll do together, will be the mayoral appointment and at large. Is that okay with? Okay, all right. So I move to appoint Tracy Langworthy to the Housing Authority, term ending March 2nd, 2018.
Isn't that to ratify the
Well,
appointment?
you'll ratify that, okay. So then there's at large. So I move to appoint Kristen Disney to the Cultural Commission, term ending March 2nd, 2018.
Second.
Full council.
Is that Starker?
And then do you need to ratify your mayoral appointment? Or just for the record or anything? All right.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. We wanted to give Council a brief overview on the current status of the Jefferson County Regional Communications Center process. This IGA will be coming to you, we hope, within the next couple of months. Present here today to do the actual presentation is Brian Wilkerson. Brian is with Revolution Consultants and has been the consultant that was hired by the Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority to look into the feasibility of this regionalization effort to see if it made sense for the county law enforcement agencies. So I'd like Brian to come up And then also present and here to answer any questions is Jeff Irvin. Jeff is the Executive Director of the Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority. And if you have particular questions that Jeff can answer, Jeff can come forward and answer those for you. Thank you. Brian.
Thank you, Chief, and thanks to the council for the opportunity to come and speak tonight. As the Chief said, we're here to really give you an update on the effort that's been going on for some time now. We were engaged last year to study different options for creating a regional communication center for Jefferson County. What I'm going to do is walk through where we ended up in terms of a recommendation and then what's happened since then, and happy to take questions as we go along. The recommendation that we landed upon as being best for Jefferson County was creating a single consolidated 911 center that had both call taking and dispatch to house that center out of the current West Metro fire facility. The reason why we chose that particular facility is that when it was actually built to house a much larger communications operation. So by using that building and using the space that's in there, it actually reduced the cost of creating such a center by quite a bit. The third aspect of it was to really make sure that we built common operating procedures, common technology, and really try to give the citizens of Jefferson County the best service possible at the lowest cost possible. When we look at how we would govern this, it would really be a separate authority board. I'll talk a little bit more about that governance in a moment. And then when we planned out what that transition would look like, we looked at basically a 16-month initial transition to go from the 8 different centers that we have now to the new consolidated center being operational and starting to move those agencies into that center. The actual migration of all the different agencies into that center would take some time after that, but the initial transition would be about a 16-month time frame. So that's an overview of what was recommended to the authority board at that time. Since then, we've had a number of public meetings. I know some of you have perhaps seen some of the presentations that we've done in other forums. We've had meetings of the city managers and various other bodies to get feedback on these different recommendations. Since then, we've been looking at how can we move this forward, and we've made a bit of progress, which I'll talk about in a moment. So when we started with this, we weren't looking at it simply from a cost savings perspective. We were looking at it as what would the benefits be really to the citizens of Jefferson County of this type of consolidation. To do that, we looked at what the impact on service levels would be to the citizens based on the different models that we had out there. And we believe that there were a number of benefits. The screen sort of shows those, and I'll hit a number of them we think are important. Most important, I think, is just improved response time, but from both a call answering, call hold time, as well as to dispatch the appropriate resources to whatever emergency was necessary. And I think that it's important to note that was really almost a deal breaker. If we couldn't see those kinds of improved service levels, then we didn't feel like going forward with a regionalization effort was really worth it. So that was first and foremost. Another aspect of it was really making sure that we could dispatch the right resources to the right problem. As many of you may know, the current process for bringing resources from one jurisdiction into another takes some time, and in some cases can be a hindrance to actually getting the right response time. If there's a resource from another jurisdiction that's on the border of the jurisdiction where it's needed, sometimes it's still actually easier and simpler to bring resources from clear across the jurisdiction because of the processes that need to happen today in order to bring resources from another jurisdiction. So this will help eliminate that and allow us to move resources across jurisdictions more easily. We also think that this is going to help reduce transfers and misdirected calls and things that happen in today's system where you have so many different answering points and calls that really have to go across jurisdictions. I think that from an internal operations perspective, we believe that we're going to be able to create an operation that really has the best of breed of all the different processes and procedures, the best training, and really some great career opportunities for staff as well who are moving into these centers. Many of the centers in Jefferson County are relatively small, are limited in opportunity, and as many of the chiefs have attested to as we've gone through this process, they often lose staff who might go to another center to take on a supervisor role or get some kind of promotion. We believe we can create some great career paths within this particular center and create just a next higher level of standard of training and of professionalism and of really great procedures across that. So we think there's a number of benefits really to moving to this regionalized model. When you look at governance, essentially what we're proposing is to set up a separate authority that each of the founding agencies, of which we hope Wheat Ridge will be one of them, would have a seat on that board, and each member of that board would have an equal vote in the operations and the oversight of this particular center. One of the things that you'll note is that beyond the one vote, there are certain decisions that would require a supermajority of the agencies involved. That would be things like changing the fundamental structure or approach to the regional center. Just given the amount of work and time that's gone into sort of determining what the right approach was, and also given the fact that there's a little bit stronger of a representation from law enforcement agencies than there are from fire agencies, there was a concern with making sure that certain decisions really had the full support of the board behind them. We anticipate having some boards, such as a citizen advisory board, that would allow elected officials and citizens to participate in some of the advisory to the governance of this particular group. In addition, many of you may know that there are jurisdictions, smaller jurisdictions in the mountains as well as in the metro area that are dispatched through some of these larger 911 centers. They would have representation on this board as well if they continue to receive services through this regionalized center. So that's an overview of the governance as it's anticipated now. I apologize for the structure on this chart. It might be a little bit difficult to see. Hopefully you can see it a little bit better in your handouts. But essentially we would have this center overseen by an executive director who would report directly to the board. And then we would have 3 different operations managers who would be responsible for fire dispatch, law enforcement dispatch, and call taking overall. And they would be over each of those respective areas. This center would have its own dedicated quality assurance staff, training staff, and information technology staff who would support the technology associated with the center. In a number of the jurisdictions who are participating in this, the staff resources available to them for things like technology, for training, et cetera, are fairly limited. And they have to take many of them have intergovernmental agreements with other places to support them from a technology perspective, or they might have to take, for example, supervisors offline to conduct training. We believe that we'll be able to create a stronger level of resourcing here and really just build the kind of excellence that we want to build in the center through this staffing model. From a personnel policies perspective, I think it's important to note that all of the agencies who are involved in this have a very strong care for the people who work in the centers today and want to make sure that we take these very highly trained and professional folks and make sure that they have the right opportunities in the center. So they've laid out these different personnel principles. One is that all the current employees that are in these various centers will have a position in the new center. It may not necessarily be the exact same position as what they have now, but we do believe that we can bring over all of the employees that are in the centers now into this new operation. The second is that we will have an application process for the management and supervisory positions within the center to make sure that we bring the very best into this. We don't have any plans, or is it in the governance, to really cut any of the salaries of people that are in the centers now. So as you may know, there are some differences in compensation across the various centers, and the plan would not be to try to bring everybody to the lowest common denominator, but rather bring everybody up to a consistent level, which would be among the higher paid centers. The main reason for that is one, to make sure that you retain the best people, but 2, so that you don't have a large amount of turnover as you move into a center like this. And this is a very typical approach for this type of consolidation. And then the last, it's important to make sure that when you move to a center like this, that the training and the staffing procedures really ensure that the staff who are in the center have the appropriate jurisdictional knowledge as they're really working with the officers there. So you don't want someone necessarily to not have any Wheat Ridge knowledge on a given shift. And so we would make sure through the training and staffing procedures that we do have that kind of jurisdictional knowledge available at any given time. From a standpoint of budgeting, right now, and you'll see this in a moment, it's about $18 million to run the 8 centers that we're talking about consolidating here. In the future, we believe that we would have about a $16.8 million operating budget. What I'll say about the budget figures that you have before you is that they're very conservative. One assumption, for example, is that we will be dealing with the same call volume in this consolidated center that we deal with across the 8 centers now. The reason why that's not likely to be true is because there's a great deal of call volume that goes through transfer from one center to another. So if Wheat Ridge receives a call that really needs to go to another jurisdiction, that would be a transfer, and that would actually be counted as an inbound call at that other call center. So by bringing these together, together, we anticipate that we will reduce the number of transfers. But to make sure that we were conservative and that we weren't in a situation where we were understaffed and thereby degrading any of the service levels, we really kept the center staffing consistent across the different areas. So we believe that this is right size. We believe that it's conservative, but in something like 911, obviously better safe than sorry. And so that's the approach that we took to budgeting. Still with that, based on things like some of the technology consolidation, licensing costs, things like that, there's a significant savings overall in terms of the county and what it costs to deliver these particular services. From a standpoint of transition timeline, as I mentioned, we're targeting an initial timeline of about 16 months from the time we really begin the transition in earnest to the point where we have the center operational. A lot of that work during that time is focused on building the right standard operating procedures, consolidating technology, and making sure that we have the right training program in place so that when the center is fully operational, the staff that's coming into that center has already been trained, they understand the policies, the procedures, the technology, et cetera, and so we minimize any potential service disruption through that. As you might imagine, it's also important to have a really strong approach to change management, communication, making sure that everybody who's potentially impacted by this understands what it means and how things are going to work in the future service models. From a standpoint of future funding, there is going to be a shift in how this center is funded. As you probably know now, each of the agencies has their own budget that they contribute to operate their 911 center, and then they also receive money from the Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority. That money is funded through 911 fees that are tacked on to telephone bills and cell phone bills and things of that nature. The Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority has been contemplating for quite some time raising that 911 fee based on some growing costs that they have to keep up with technology and other components. At a recent board meeting, they did decide to raise that fee to 70 cents, and that increase went in place February 1st. Sorry, my fault. The dollars that are being brought in with that will help to fund the transition, and then in the steady state actually help to fund a larger share of the operations of that agency. What the net of that is that each of the jurisdictions should actually see a reduction in their cost to receive these 911 services. Right now, the way that that's anticipated is essentially that the savings would be shared proportionally among the 8 different jurisdictions who would be participating in this. So we anticipate at this point that the overall agency savings would be about 24% from their current baseline budget. Now, the caution that I want to throw out on that is that it's important to think about when you want to start taking those cost savings. So, for example, one of the principles that we put out is nobody losing their jobs in the course of this transition. Over time, you have attrition in centers like this, et cetera, and so that would be an opportunity to start taking some cost savings as things stabilize. I think it'll be up to the board at that time to really decide, is it the right time to take the savings? Do we want to continue to be conservative from a staffing perspective? That's just a simple example of some of the choices that governance will need to make. I also want to note that the 2 agencies that were not involved in this particular study and who would not be participating in the initial consolidation are City of Westminster and City and County of Broomfield. So there are a few key decisions to be made still. Most of these revolve around technology. So some of the approaches to how we're going to do radio consolidation, technology consolidation still need to be determined, and those are in discussion now. Part of the things that we want to do when you create a consolidated center is have a site where if there were some sort of disaster or some sort of communications outage, we could move the operation to, and so we're exploring a number of different options in that particular area. Those supermajority decisions that I mentioned for the intergovernmental agreement are still being discussed. As I mentioned, some of the smaller agencies that are currently being dispatched through an Evergreen Fire or through a Jefferson County Sheriff, right now the amount that they pay for those services varies quite a bit. And so one decision that has to be made is what would the future payment sort of approach be for those agencies. As well as what would we need to do in order to bring in new agencies. So beyond the 8 agencies that are participating from the beginning, had been a desire that's been expressed by, for example, the Jefferson County School Districts to bring their emergency dispatch operations into this center. And then lastly, you probably know that much of the volume that comes into these 911 centers is actually not emergency calls. In many cases, it's administrative calls or other calls for assistance, and so we would need to determine what the approach to those are. One of the things that I didn't mention in the staffing is that we would have some staff dedicated in the center to taking those non-emergency, more administrative calls, but the exact procedures, what would come into the center versus go other places, is still something that we would need to determine. So those are the foundational updates that I wanted to provide for you, and I'm certainly happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. I had a couple of questions, and it's perhaps particularly germane that we're talking about this tonight in the national news tonight. There was quite an in-depth story about the lack of cell phone coverage, being able to respond to cell phone coverage. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I think, when you look at a story like that, obviously there's a lot of different aspects to it. Some are technology oriented, some are regulatory related, et cetera. I think the thing that I would say that it's important to note about this is that one of the reasons why this consolidation makes sense is that eventually all of the different agencies are going to have to go to the next generation of 911 systems, which help address some of the things that you're seeing in the news now. We believe that the cost to Jefferson County, as well as the speed at which you can get to those next-gen 911 systems, are both helped by this type of consolidation. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to speak a little more to that.
One thing I did want to mention, this is Jeff Irvin. I'm the Executive Director of the Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority. One thing I want to mention, I haven't seen the story yet. I've heard about it and I read the article on 9 News. One of the things that we've done through our authority and in conjunction with all of the agencies that serve in our advisory committee is fund a system called Smart 911. And if you have gone in and smart911.com and registered your cell phone, we get a lot more information regarding your cell phone than would normally come in just on a phase 2 display, as you've heard them talking about phase 1 versus phase 2. So that gives us a real leg up in knowing if you're calling from your cell phone, you are down in your house or somewhere exactly where you're at because of the information brought in by Smart 911 in addition to the coordinate or the subscriber address that we may get. In a metro area like Wheat Ridge, you're very fortunate in that you have a high cell density. Some of it comes down to which type of handset you have. The FCC has just recently rolled out new accuracy rules that are going to hopefully enhance the ability to locate these devices over time. But nonetheless, regardless of how good it gets when you're out there with a radio device, there can be things that can affect the ability to find that device. As GPS capability increases and that smart device itself is able to send a coordinate from its location, not relying upon the cell system to triangulate or a GPS that phone, it'll get better over time. We're looking forward to that. Okay, it's smart911.com. We rolled it out. Smart911.com is where they go. Yes, if I go there, it rolled out about 2 years ago, and they can register their phones there.
And Mayor, that's on our website, and we've put out press releases in regards to that. So it might be a good opportunity after this news story to put that information out again. We'll do that.
And I did have one other follow-up. I noticed that Wheat Ridge Fire Department is not listed as one of the agencies that would be benefiting from this, and can someone speak to that? I'm not sure.
I can speak to that,
okay.
Mr. Starker. Wheat Ridge Fire Department is, their calls for service are dispatched by the West Metro Fire Department. We are the 911 center for Wheat Ridge, so we take their calls, and then Brian had touched on this, that routing of calls. We'd take the 911 call and we would route that call to West Metro, and then West Metro would dispatch Wheat Ridge Fire. Same for Fairmont Fire, same situation for the Fairmont Fire District, Arvada Fire District, and the West Metro Fire District. Those 911 calls come to our center, and then we redirect those calls based on that, and that would go away with this system.
But all of those calls for fire service as well as police and emergency services
all go to one center.
Would be covered under this. Thank you so much.
And if I may emphasize that, one of the situations we have right now is there are 3 secondary PSAPs in Jefferson County: Arvada Fire, Evergreen Fire, and West Metro Fire. And this consolidated center would eliminate those 3 secondary PSAPs to where those secondary transfers would be eliminated. When you call in and you need a medical assistance, the person that's talking to you will hold your hand from the time you call until the arrival of first responder. There won't be any transfer of that call or need to give additional information or give information twice for that matter that would delay the response. Public safety answering point. There's 10 public safety answering points served by our authority, 7 of which are primary PSAPs, 6 of which are in 6 of which are in Jefferson County, right.
I'm not sure who this is for. Maybe it's more for Chief, but I noticed in the presentation, and thank you for that, the concept of radio consolidation, or just kind of the technology, looking at the technology moving forward. I know we have an equipment replacement fund. I'm just wondering whether it's anticipated that radio fleet is going to be determined to be able to transfer into this, and if not, if we're going to be able to, if we're funded in the equipment replacement fund to be able to handle that.
Well, we would still rely on that equipment replacement fund to replace our radios. Some of that funding, like with our portable radios, the last time when we had to purchase new radios, the 911 Authority Board helped with some of that funding. We had to cover the rest of that funding to do that. So, you know, we'd look for opportunities to do that in the future, but we'd still need money in that fund for technology-related kinds of things. But we wouldn't be spending the money that we are today on some of the technology that's in our current center, because it'd be in this new center. So the elimination of the duplication of purchasing equipment would be reduced here. You'd be buying it for one center, you wouldn't be buying it for 10 centers.
Madam Mayor? I had 2 questions, and I'm not sure who it would be appropriate to answer it. With respect to the Wheat Ridge non-emergency phone number, how would those calls be handled, and who would be responsible for vetting those? Or
So I'll take a swag at that one. We're still in the process of discussing that. If you looked at the organizational chart that Brian had that's in the packet we handed out, there is a spot there for administrative calls. And what we need to figure out, and every agency is going to have to address this, is what is that going to look like? Is this 911 center going to take those administrative calls and then route those to a particular location, so the city of Wheat Ridge? So we would probably have to have a location here that those calls can be routed to. I'm not sure yet if that's going to be to our telephone reporting unit, to our records unit, or to key administrative staff. Is one potential option. The second potential option is if somebody called and said, I need to speak to Commander Pickett, that person at the center would pull out the Wheat Ridge phone list and say, okay, Commander Pickett's at this number, push a button and just transfer the call. But because we have a number of other priorities in front of us here, we haven't really gotten to that number on the list yet, but we'll have to address it because it's a reality of what we deal with.
Sure. And then my other question is related to the governance of the organization as it relates to the entities that have been selected as the governance board. There are other entities that are being served by that, but they don't have any representation on that board. What has been their response to that structure? Or
Right. So the agencies that you see on that current governance board are those agencies that have current communications centers.
Okay.
So those are the agencies that sort of have, for lack of a better term, skin in the game. We have had some discussions with the chiefs, both from the fire side and the law enforcement side, and are talking about a way of having a secondary tier board where they could provide input to the larger board. We thought it was very, very important that those agencies that actually had the money invested in equipment and people have the opportunity to sit on this broader governance board. And Jeff and Brian, if you want to jump in there, you can.
I just want to add to that 2 things. One is that every agency that receives services from this center would have a formal service level agreement that really outline what they could expect from a service perspective, which is not what most of these agencies have today. It's more of a, you know, best effort kind of piece. So they would have that as one of their safeguards. The other component, which the chief alluded to, is that, as you probably saw in the governance, there's an operations committee and an advisory committee, and it's anticipated at this point that the other agencies who are served through the center would have a seat on that operations committee and have more direct input through that particular body and into the governance.
Yeah, I just kind of curious as to how the different intergovernmental agreements that are currently in place are then transitioned to this type of service operations, so that that there's some input provided by those entities, as well as the fact that some of these entities have the ability to raise revenues and whatnot through taxes and the like, and how that all interplays. So.
Yeah, and I'll add just a couple pieces since you mentioned the revenue component of it. You know, they would in the future have an intergovernmental agreement with this particular authority, and so that would outline all of those components. And we do anticipate at this point that there would be some dollars coming from those agencies, and many of them do pay today for some level of service. The only thing we haven't figured out yet is what's that exact formula and what's that going to look like. Many of these agencies we've been in dialogue with, either through some of the larger meetings that we've had or through some smaller individual meetings with some of the mountain fire departments, et cetera. So they've been aware. We've gotten a lot of feedback from them around how they'd like to see it work in the future, et cetera. So we're trying to make sure that we address those concerns as part of it.
And do you see at any point that this entity would be in a situation where they themselves would be responsible for raising revenue themselves through some sort of taxing authority or other element like that, or is that incumbent on the existing entities?
If I understand, you do want to try to address that?
Let me try to address that. So there are some entities that exist that participate with larger comm centers. So Mountain View, Edgewater, and Lakeside are dispatched by the Jeffco Sheriff's Office. They're not paying any fees at all right now. So as we move to this larger entity, there may be some fees associated with calls for service. We haven't come up with what that funding model would look like, but it's all going to be relative to, you know, what their impact on this center you know, is. There are other entities like Wheat Ridge Fire that currently pays the West Metro Fire Protection District a fee to do their dispatching and the call taking that comes from our agency, and so that would be a consideration as well. Each of those jurisdictions is going to probably have to make their own decision in regards to whether or not they're going to be able to pay those costs from existing budget revenues, or seek some funding alternative, whether it's a fee or a tax to move forward. But that's generally applies to those entities that aren't paying anything today. So we're going to have skin in this game as the city of Wheat Ridge, paying based on the size of our agency and the calls for service, and that same sort of formula is going to apply, you know, to everybody that participates. But it's not going to be, you know, at least from the perspective of looking at the total number of dollars of this of center, anything that's going to break their bank.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Then, if I understand it correctly, or the authority that we're setting up is it would be its own independent organization, if you will, created by the board of directors as you've described them. The employees that sort of migrate from these agencies, would they then become employees of this new authority and cease to be employees of the various organizations now that they are? And then in the future, then all of the replacement for those employees, it would be another organization that's this 911 authority. Is that?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And to reiterate your point, Chief Brennan, that it's sort of paid. You pay based upon the amount of services that you use from the center, or proportionally. Is that?
Well, it's proportional. It's looking at that total budget. So you're going to have a variety of different pieces of funding. And Brian, jump in here if I mess this up. The cities are going to pay a certain amount of money based on what we're currently paying today. And so what we're looking at is, with all the funding sources that we have coming in here, the net output of that is hopefully we'll be paying about 24% less with this new funding model than we're paying today. The Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority, instead of having to buy similar pieces of equipment for all these different PSAPs now, will be able to buy equipment for just one center. And there'll be a cost savings from that perspective, and more of an investment in terms of the technology kinds of equipment that'll come in there. So it's really a win-win situation. The other big piece even that I think for our jurisdiction is the force multiplier that we're going to get out of this. And the force multiplier is we're going to have a fully staffed center that's going to be operating 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and we're not going to get into some of the binds that we've gotten into here because we haven't had enough staffing to handle the volume of calls or an event that's occurring in this city. Because you're going to have all of those resources, in one location that we're going to be able to strategically have to handle different kinds of calls for service that occur in the different jurisdictions. Brian, I don't know if you wanted to jump in.
No,
with any
I think
more on
that's
that.
spot on. I think that's right on.
And I had one more follow-up, and then I promise not to do any more. You believe that you have the real estate in the West Metro District location in order to not need to build a new facility, a new 8,200 square foot and at about 2.75 million. So that's
correct.
a considerable savings going into the program.
It is, and we've validated that in a couple of different ways, not just by overall square footage, but by actually laying out the space we need in terms of consoles and things like that. And so we do believe that we have the space.
Thank you very much.
The plan would be to bring you an IGA here in the next couple of months to act on.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think I have anything this evening. Thank you.
Just one item. Earlier tonight, you under citizens' comments, you got some comments on a pending application for a special use permit for a tattoo parlor. We certainly are open for citizens' comments, and those can come in on any subject, and that's fine. These applications, however, for special use permits are quasi-judicial, and that means a couple of things. It means that the council may not prejudge that application. You haven't had the hearing yet. You haven't heard the applicant, haven't heard the presentation, haven't heard the staff, haven't heard the public testimony. We have this provision that allows for citizen comment, and occasionally, it's rare, but occasionally you'll get a citizen comment on something under public comments in advance of the actual public hearing. And all I'm doing is reminding you that, in fact, it is a pending application, which means you can't prejudge it, despite how you might be urged to think about it one way or another now. You have to keep an open mind because you're the judges on it, and you'll have plenty of opportunity to make up your minds. That's the first thing. Secondly, to the extent you get communications about this application outside of the public hearing process, do with them as you are always recommended to do. If it's email, you send that to the staff. They'll make sure it's then duplicated and given to everyone ahead of time so it can be made a part of the record. If people approach you about this in the grocery aisle, use one of the 3 or 4 different techniques that many times I've mentioned to you to urge that those comments, for good reasons, have to come to the public hearing, can't be taken privately out of the hearing of the rest of you or the applicant or the other opponents. And you all have been down this road many times, so you know the techniques that work best for you to encourage people to come to the hearing and to say it there. That's all I've got. I know you knew that, but it came up, and I thought I'd remind us all of what the rules are. Thanks.
I don't have anything tonight.
I don't have anything at this point. Thank you.
Nothing?
Thank you. I just wanted to put out a note. We will actually be, Councilman Fitzgerald and I will be working on another Coffee with Councilman session coming up on March 7th, and we'll work on the exact date and time, time and location for that. So I just wanted to put that out there, but we'll be communicating that through the website and through email. March 7th, Saturday.
Just wanted to remind everybody that spring break starts March 23rd at the Wheat Ridge High School. So, and April 17th, we'll be down in the Greenbelt planting trees again with City of Wheat Ridge and the IES Environmental Group. And so they're looking for some contributions from city council members to buy additional trees and plantings. So I'll send out their donation request when I get it from IES. And like I said, there's about 30 students from the high school, and then we have, once in a while, we have a grade school shows up, and they will plant after we do or before us. And it's also with Margaret Pageant. She does a really great job with that. And so that's all I have. March 3rd is spring break. No, I know, April 17th. That's the only one that matters, right? No. And then I have a tattoo, so does that mean I can't vote on the quasi-judicial matter coming up soon? Because I'll be biased. No. Right here. In all my glory. Okay.
And we don't want to know what it says or where it is.
TMI.
We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, TMI.
TMI. TMI. Nothing, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question for the city manager with respect to the Urban Land Institute presentation that was made. What would be the next steps with respect to that presentation, and what information can we provide to the residents with respect to the recommendations that were made, and how does staff then synthesize that information?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mr. Urban. Just to maybe get a little bit more information on that, we had Urban Land Institute Technical Advisory Panel in Wheat Ridge last week, and looking at our commuter rail station. A few of you were able to make the presentation, so thank you for that. They did provide recommendations on what they felt the market feasibility is of that area in Wheat Ridge, and they differ a little bit from some of the current planning documents that are in place today. So I talked to staff today about it. They had a debrief on that session. I haven't been debriefed about their debrief yet, but they don't feel that we have to recreate anything necessarily, but maybe refocus some of our planning. As you were there, Mr. Urban, the recommendations were that we focus on primary employment opportunities with some residential also. And so we will be coming back to council in the next few months with some recommendations on how to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further?
Nothing tonight, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Let me say that again. Care Bear Bakery. What is the first Saturday in March? I don't know what that date is, but it's the first one.
The 7th.
The 7th?
Oh, 7th.
7th.
March 7th.
March 7th, 9 a.m., Care Bear. And Genevieve, you got something? I'm done.
One other thing I wanted to mention about the high school, the play is going to start this weekend, so the 27th and 28th, and then March 5th to 7th, and it's a musical. Tickets are $12, and it is Oklahoma.
Good. Let's go out singing. I believe that's the end, and we can adjourn the meeting.